Have you ever been erased like you never existed? Not just let go, but wiped clean. Deleted from the system, denied credit for everything you built and replaced by someone who didn't even know how the servers were cooled. That was me. After 25 years holding everything together behind the scenes at Merritron Technologies in Austin, I was cast aside in a 9:20 a.m. meeting like a used-up battery. They thought I'd go quietly, thought I'd vanish without a ripple. I didn't shout. I didn't protest. I just walked out and built something better. And now they're paying a license fee to use it. They still don't know it's mine. If you've ever been overlooked, undervalued, or replaced by someone with a shinier degree and zero context, I made this story for you. Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, what did they take from you? They didn't just fire me. They erased me. One moment, I was Diane Mallory, Director of Infrastructure Compliance, with 2 decades of crisis response vendor triage and federal systems audits under my belt. The next, my access badge turned red at the security gate. My email, gone. My internal profile replaced with a role-deactivated message. No goodbye lunch, no handover, just silence, like they believed deleting my name from a dashboard could delete everything I'd done. The meeting was a farce. A calendar invite labeled Strategy Sync in a glass-walled room that practically smelled like offboarding. Evan, the CEO, breezed in late, carrying a paper cup and zero eye contact. He read a script like it was a grocery list. Used words like modernization, push, reducing redundancy, and optimizing agility. I used to explain those buzzwords to junior staff so they wouldn't panic. Now, they were being used on me. Shannon from HR sat beside him tense, like she was under orders not to blink. Across from me, Kevin, the new automation lead, barely 32, straight out of a consulting firm, fresh suit, zero field knowledge. I had cables older than him. He didn't speak, just tapped and swiped through his tablet like he was already running the show. I didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't even blink. They handed me a white folder with a severance outline like it was a favor. Evan gave me a tight, rehearsed smile and said, "We really appreciate your contributions, Diane." Contributions. Like I'd donated some office chairs. I stood slowly, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted them to sit in the weight of what they'd just done. I looked around that room, pausing at the corner, where I once pulled a 17-hour shift rerouting servers during a blackout that would have cost us $4.2 million in lost logistics. The same corner where Evan once toasted me with a glass of flat champagne for saving our Northeast region from collapse. He didn't mention that. No one did. I walked out without the severance folder. No box, no farewell, not even a stapler. But I had already packed what mattered. Because I wasn't just a name in their org chart, I was the system's memory. And they were about to find out what it feels like to run blind. And when they came crawling back 3 months later, desperate for the solution I had already sold under a different name, I let someone else answer the call. The same corner where Evan once praised me for saving the contract that kept our entire fiscal year afloat. Funny he didn't mention that today. No one did. I walked out of the building with nothing in my hands. No box, no papers, not even my personal items. I had already moved them out the day before. You learn to feel the shift before it lands. The way conversations dry up when you enter the room. The way you're suddenly left off planning calls. The delay before someone uses your name during team meetings. The hallway glances. The offhand comments. "We're thinking of fresh energy," or "You've been doing this a long time, haven't you?" I had seen it all coming, and I was ready. But what they weren't ready for was what I did next. See, I was never just a director of infrastructure. I was the interpreter, the buffer, the safety net between chaos and compliance. I rerouted supply chains during Texas snowstorms, patched back-end failures without fanfare, flagged vendor risk weeks before the paperwork caught up. I didn't write all of that down, not because I was guarding it, but because no one ever bothered to ask. They were too busy praising data while ignoring the woman carrying the consequences. Now they thought they could replace that with dashboards and AI plugins, Kevin's new normal. They thought wrong. I didn't take the severance, didn't ask for references, didn't say goodbye. I stepped out into the cold January wind without looking back, because what they took from me wasn't a title or a paycheck. What they really stripped away was the illusion that I ever mattered to them, that they ever truly saw me. And what I took from them, that came later, I didn't go back. I redirected. They assumed that if it wasn't logged, if it wasn't part of some process, it didn't exist. That was their first mistake. They didn't realize I never needed documentation. I was the documentation. Every clean audit they ever passed, that was me. Every shipment that didn't miss a customs checkpoint, every quiet system escalation that never turned into a PR crisis. I'd mapped those moves in my head years before they happened. But try telling that to a conference room full of execs in suits who think leadership is just about optimizing KPIs. The truth is, the things they called unscalable were the only things holding their fragile operation together. When I rerouted 3 Eastern Corridor deliveries to bypass a sudden security lockdown at a federal hub, I didn't log it. I didn't have to. I already knew which vendor couldn't adjust routes past 3:00 p.m., and which site manager always called me directly instead of logging a ticket. When a compliance auditor flagged a misfiled record from the Barrett account, I had already corrected it 2 days prior because I knew their rep only updated backups late on Thursdays when she was under stress. I knew the vendors who ghosted emails during family emergencies, the engineers who flagged line 17 first in every report, the regional managers who only responded when I called from my personal line, not my work phone. I didn't carry that knowledge for praise. I carried it because no one else could. And now they thought they could digitize instinct, replace memory with metrics. They were wrong, and I was just getting started. I didn't carry those details out of loyalty. I carried them because no one else could. But they wanted something different, a system that didn't rely on people like me. They believed that if they wiped the slate clean, digitized every process, and built something sleeker, leaner, and simpler, they'd be free. Free from what they called human error. Free from legacy burdens. Free from me. But simplicity without memory is just ignorance, dressed up in a sleek user interface. The irony is, I tried to share what I knew. More than once. Not in grand speeches or formal meetings, but in quiet moments. I offered to create bridge documents to pass on institutional knowledge, to train junior staff on why emergency procedures worked the way they did, to explain that some failures weren't mistakes, they were carefully designed fail-safes. We learned those lessons the hard way, through long nights, costly mistakes, and near catastrophes. But they declined. Too time-consuming, they said. Too difficult to scale, they said. They wanted plug and play a system anyone could use without understanding its heartbeat. But my work, it was never plug and play. It was custom-built living knowledge. You learn to feel the shift before everything cracks. And when they shut me out, they lost access to the real map, because their blueprint was only skin deep. Mine was structural. They erased what they couldn't see, assuming the surface was enough. But the cracks weren't on the surface. The cracks were in the rhythm, the way trucks moved slightly faster on Thursdays because of unlogged overtime, the way Route 17 always lagged during lunar holidays thanks to unspoken staffing shortages, the way new hire compliance dipped every Q1 because HR's onboarding portal froze under traffic surges. Every year, without fail. They didn't just lose data when they deleted me, they lost context. And context is the only thing that tells you what's about to break before it does. I didn't remind them. I didn't warn them. They chose ignorance dressed as innovation. And what they didn't know was about to cost them. Because when you erase the map, you don't just lose direction. You lose the roads you never even knew existed. 3 weeks after I disappeared from their system, I received a LinkedIn message from a founder I barely remembered meeting at a supply chain conference years ago. Her name was Riley Chen, and she ran a small tech startup specializing in compliance analytics for aerospace subcontractors. Her message was short. You once spoke about building systems that think like people. Are you still thinking about that? I didn't respond right away. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I was done wasting energy on people who only listened when it was convenient. But Riley was different. She followed up with a voice message. Just one sentence, I don't need your resume. I need your brain. If Diane's story touched you and you believe in the power of quiet strength and resilience, I invite you to subscribe now. Join our community where every untold story finds its voice and every silent victory is celebrated. By subscribing, you'll never miss the next chapter of Diane's journey and countless others like hers that reveal the hidden battles fought behind the scenes. Together, we'll uncover the courage in restraint and the justice in silence. Hit that subscribe button and be part of a movement that honors those who build, protect, and rise quietly but powerfully. That was the first time in months someone asked for what I actually offered. So I agreed to meet Riley for coffee. Her office wasn't sleek, no glass walls, no fancy subscription espresso machines humming in the background. It was a modest space, tucked into an older building in downtown Austin, but it had something rare: energy, genuine curiosity, and a silence that made room for ideas instead of pressure. She didn't try to sell me equity or promise some flashy executive title. Instead, she asked me what systems fail in silence, what blind spots no software can ever catch. I told her everything, not because I was trying to sell a product, but because for the first time in years, someone was actually listening. The next week, I joined their weekly planning sprint. I started mapping out what I called behavioral failures, not mere user errors, but system assumptions that ignored human pattern shifts. The team didn't flinch at the term. They sketched models on whiteboards, asked probing questions. They pulled engineers into the conversation, not to override my logic, but to reflect it to make it stronger. And just like that, I found myself building something I'd never been given permission to create before. A system that didn't just track outcomes, but anticipated fractures, not with blunt alerts or meaningless KPIs, but with nuanced layers of context. Audit preparation dashboards that adjusted dynamically based on seasonal hiring trends. Vendor reliability scores that accounted for unspoken variables, like region-specific weather volatility and local labor patterns. Even contract templates with embedded historical prompts that flagged common breakpoints. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was clarity. For the first time, I wasn't whispering truths into a void. I was laying the foundation for a platform that refused to pretend human memory was irrelevant. I wasn't coming back from my old job. I was building something that would eventually force them to come to me. Even if they didn't know it yet, I was designing it with a romantic notion that it would hurt them. That's the part nobody ever believes. The platform wasn't built as a weapon. It was built as a cure. A cure for all the things they thought could be automated, but never truly understood. Riley's team gave me space, and I gave them the framework. Not a rehash of existing models, but a living, breathing system. A structure that anticipated silent fractures before they escalated into public collapse. We called it Helix. Not just a logistics tool, not just a compliance tracker. Helix was a memory engine. It captured everything corporate systems ignored: unwritten shifts in behavior context, base triggers, trust decay, and transformed them into predictive signals. Not alerts that screamed after the damage was done, but quiet pulses warning you where to listen. I didn't feed Helix my old company's data. That wasn't necessary. What I built were universal principles that worked anywhere people operated under pressure, where systems pretended everything was fine. It was coded in behavioral thresholds, patterns that didn't show up in metrics, but surfaced in subtle mood changes when clients shifted tone in emails, when field teams increasingly used short-form responses, when site logins dropped 2%, but dashboards still marked systems as healthy. Healthy by the dashboard. But Helix caught those subtle changes, flagged them quietly, and gave people the chance to ask questions long before they had to apologize for failures. It wasn't glamorous work, but it worked. Within 3 months, 2 mid-size aerospace suppliers adopted our beta version. One used it to catch a pre-inspection failure 3 weeks before a scheduled government audit. That early warning saved them $280,000 in potential fines and remediation costs. They renewed the contract before the pilot even ended. Word spread quietly, no headlines, no LinkedIn posts. Instead, through whispered conversations, trusted recommendations, and surprise demo requests from firms I'd never imagined would hear about us. And then it happened. A procurement lead from my old company, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, booked a meeting through our inquiry portal. No name attached. Just a generic company email, a burner domain, and a terse message. Interested in system demo for proactive compliance forecasting. Q3 rollout urgency. They didn't know who built the system. Not yet. They were scrambling to survive a collapse they didn't even realize was underway. I had moved on. But Helix was built for moments exactly like this. Not to punish, not to expose, not to destroy, but to reveal what happens when people try to digitize away memory and call it modernization. I didn't jack up the price. I didn't even join the call. Riley handled the walkthrough, calm and precise. When asked if Helix had any roots in legacy processes, she said, "This system was designed by someone who carried the weight of forgetting so others didn't have to." They didn't recognize the line, but I did. Because I'd said those exact words once in a budget meeting they barely noticed. Now they were paying to hear it again through a platform they couldn't afford to ignore. They didn't know it was me at first. The contract arrived cloaked under a generic procurement initiative buried deep inside a batch of digital transformation projects hastily approved during a crisis control session. By the time their legal team signed off, Helix had already been deployed across 2 of their most vulnerable divisions, compliance oversight and supplier integrity. I read the rollout memo forwarded by someone on Riley's team. It was almost poetic phrased to enhance operational resilience and anticipate vendor risk through adoption of a third-party behavioral analytics tool designed to support proactive audits and stabilize compliance. They made it sound like their idea. They had no idea I was reading every metric they produced, watching them feed usage logs into a system that existed only because they'd refused to listen when I was still in the building. But I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just watched the reports roll in the errors. They couldn't explain the flags they couldn't trace. Subtle corrections Helix made before their dashboards even noticed a blip. They had no idea the code was responding to rhythms I memorized long ago, patterns no machine could learn on its own. Things like seasonal labor inconsistencies during peak months, which suppliers quietly adjusted delivery schedules to avoid inspections after holidays. Which sites increased short-term staffing without logging it, causing hidden compliance risks, all of it invisible to traditional systems. But Helix saw it, because I had seen it long before. Their schedules quietly shifted to avoid inspections right after holiday weekends. Helix caught every subtle change because I had seen it all before, back when nobody thought those small signals mattered. Now companies were paying per seat per user to re-access the knowledge they once discarded as outdated instinct. They even hosted a webinar to promote their new compliance culture. I didn't watch it, but someone sent me a clip. Evan, still CEO, stood confidently in front of a branded slide deck and said, "We've reimagined how we view risk through systems that learn from human nuance, not just raw data." He didn't know those were my words. Verbatim. I had written them in an internal memo that never got a response. Now those words were being quoted in his keynote. I didn't call him out. I didn't show up. That wasn't the point. The point was this. They had fired the very person who built their silent safety net, and now, without knowing it, they had licensed it back from her. Not as an employee, not as a partner, but as a quiet, anonymous line item buried under strategic vendor solutions. I didn't need a title anymore. I had something better influence, without attachment power, without noise. They thought I was gone, but I was just upstream watching, calculating, collecting what they once thought was disposable. Now, it was their most expensive subscription. The dashboard pings every Monday morning at 6:05 a.m. Not because I programmed it to, but because that has always been the hour when things start to unravel. The shift after weekend silence. The hour of forgotten resets, overlooked entries, and subtle data drifts. Now Helix sends me a soft summary every week. Vendor trust thresholds, behavior drift, flag suppressions, compliance lag indicators. It speaks in a language I invented. translated into clean, understandable metrics for people who used to shrug when I warned them something felt off. I don't reply to the alerts. I just read them. I watch as the system predicts the very same failures I used to catch with a glance, now dressed in heat maps and variable flowcharts. The company that once erased me now functions through a framework carrying my fingerprints in every line of code, every escalation curve, every silent correction. And they don't know it. That part of the system, the part they never documented, never credited, is the part I never needed recognition for. Their names appear on the user list, but mine never does. I don't exist inside their org chart anymore. I'm not part of their return to occupancy plan. No onboarding document references what I contributed. But when they run their quarterly report and see the failure rate stay below threshold for the third straight cycle, someone will nod in satisfaction, unaware that the thing holding those numbers steady isn't the shiny new system they built. It's the system they lost. A new manager once reached out to me anonymously through a feature request channel inside Helix's dashboard. She asked if someday the system could anticipate breakdowns in team cohesion before those issues showed up in the numbers. I smiled to myself. She didn't know I'd already started building that very layer because that's what it was always about. Not revenge, not retribution, but redirection. They wanted to forget me, so I let them. And in that forgetting, they created space for something better. Not better for them, better for me. I log in every Monday morning, read the reports, make quiet tweaks to the algorithms and thresholds. Then I close the window and get on with my life. I don't dwell on what was lost. I don't go back. I don't apply Helix again in any new setting. They still think they replaced me. But every Monday, like clockwork, they run on something I left behind. And I'm still the only one who knows how it breathes. They never sent me a message. Never acknowledged the ripple effects, never asked what else I was carrying when I left, but I saw it. Reflected in every delayed audit, every panicked contract review, every quiet system patch rushed through after Helix flagged a pattern no one else understood. I wasn't looking for credit. I just watched week after week as they adjusted to a system they believed was new, never realizing it was built from the shadows of the one they broke. What they called innovation. It was just memory repurposed and restructured. What they branded as foresight. Just my hindsight repackaged and sold back to them. The cost of erasing me wasn't in headlines or market caps. It was in the gap between what they thought they could rebuild and what I never wrote down. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to be seen. I only needed time. Time to design something so effective they couldn't avoid it. Something so quiet they'd never notice whose hands had shaped it. That's the difference between being replaced and being remembered. They replaced my name, but they run on my silence. And that silence, the cost of it, was never on their balance sheet. It was only ever mine. But what are the lessons from this story? This isn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It's about recognition earned through restraint. Diane's journey shows us that not all power needs to announce itself with noise or fury. Sometimes the deepest impact is made not by striking back, but by walking away with what they never realized they needed. Most your knowledge, your instinct, your silent contribution. She didn't sabotage. She didn't scream. She didn't seek applause. Instead, she quietly redirected her energy into something bigger. Something that eventually forced those who erased her to depend on what they tried to dismiss. In today's fast-moving, hyper-automated world, it's easy for companies and institutions to undervalue the people who hold systems together with memory, trust, and care. We glorify data, we worship dashboards, but we ignore the people behind it. And that's the truth Diane wants you to remember. We replace presence with platforms. But Diane's story reminds us that no amount of artificial intelligence can ever replace emotional intelligence. The deep, unspoken understanding of how people work, what they need, and when everything is about to unravel. Here's the hard truth many don't want to hear. Sometimes you won't get credit. Sometimes you won't get justice. But that doesn't mean you've lost. Surviving with your values intact and building something stronger from that pain is a form of justice all its own. Diane never needed her name on the door. She built the door. And now, They walk through it every day without even realizing who crafted the hinges or how to get started. So start documenting your value for yourself, even if no one asks. In relationships that aren't defined by your title, but by trust. Don't fight to stay where you're undervalued. Redirect that fight into something that reflects your worth. Most importantly, protect your energy. Not everything deserves your reaction. Sometimes, silence is your sharpest weapon. If this story reminded you of a time you were overlooked, underestimated, or quietly erased, share it in the comments below. You're not alone. And if you're building your own version of Helix, your own legacy of quiet strength and resilience, we want to hear about that too. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that speak to your resilience, your strength, and the silent battles fought behind the scenes. Share this video with someone who's been holding it all together in silence, because they deserve to know they're not invisible and their story isn't over. In a world that moves faster every day, where data dominates decisions and algorithms dictate outcomes, it's easy to forget the human element, the nuance, the empathy, the gut instinct that no machine can replicate. That's what Diane's journey is about. It's about honoring the invisible work, the moments no one else notices, the care and expertise that keep everything running smoothly even when the spotlight is elsewhere. Her story shows us that true power often lives in restraint, in the quiet decisions to build rather than break, to create rather than destroy. It reminds us to hold tight to our knowledge, our intuition, and our silent contributions, to protect them fiercely even when the world seems to undervalue them. Because sometimes the greatest victories aren't the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones that happen behind the scenes, slowly, steadily, and with unshakable dignity. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or erased like I was, I want you to know this story is for you. It's for the quiet heroes who keep everything running behind the scenes, but never get the credit they deserve. If Diane's journey resonates with you, please show your support by leaving a comment below. Share your own experiences. Tell me how you faced being undervalued, how you kept your dignity intact, or how you turned pain into strength. Your words matter, and together we can build a community that lifts each other up. Here's what I want you to take away from this story. Protect your energy fiercely. Don't waste it fighting battles where you aren't valued. Instead, redirect that fight into creating something meaningful, something that reflects your true worth. Document your contributions, even if no one asks, because one day, that quiet knowledge will become your greatest power. Remember, not every fight is worth your attention. Sometimes silence and patience are your sharpest weapons. If you're holding back, unsure if your efforts matter, know this: your impact is bigger than you realize. Whether you're a Diane in your own story or someone who's still searching for their voice, remember that resilience, integrity, and quiet strength will open doors that noise never could. I encourage you to stand tall in your truth and keep building even when it feels like no one is watching. Please subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of resilience, justice, and silent victories. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because none of us should ever feel invisible, and our stories are far from over.